Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
So why do you like pie so much?
Who doesn't like pie? I wouldn't trust someone who doesn't like pie. Or dogs.
What's wrong with pie?
Everything's wrong with pie,
Nothing
dude.
is wrong with
You're
pie.
a grown-ass man.
How many times do I have to explain this? The pie works. The pie works, Garrett.
I love it. It's little like me.
I don't even like pie.
I think I'm asexual.
You can reproduce by yourself? What?
You want to come back to my place, smoke some weed, and listen to music the way it's meant to be listened to?
In women's clothing.
What?
No.
No.
Yeah. On vinyl.
Everyone is thinking in binary, bro. Ones and zeros, yes or no.
Not everyone can just live their life without emotion. You need some level of emotion.
Look at me, I'm very happy.
Look at you.
Sometimes the fucking you get ain't worth the fucking you're gonna get. Life's too short.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 377. Out now on digital is About Pie, a romantic comedy that follows a young man's misadventures in modern romance and his obsession with pie. A well-written and charming independent production that makes great use of its Los Angeles location. About Pie also marks the feature film directorial debut of Joshua Lester, who also wrote and stars in the film. And I'm glad to say that Joshua joins me now on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. Josh, I thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to be here.
It's really interesting, just doing some research on you and just reading up about your career. You know, your background, I mean, you're someone with... You have a lot of fingers and a lot of different pies, like pardon the pun there. You work in effects, you've produced movies, you've done shorts, and now you've made your own film. I'm just really curious about the story, about how the idea of About Pie, how did that kind of come up in your life, and framing the screenplay, etc. How did that all kind of come about?
Well, I was like thinking about this literal question. And how the story of making this movie was the failure to make movies before that. My background in my career so far has been was my decision to go for jobs and learn skills that are related to actual filmmaking instead of the networking route in Los Angeles. And because the whole point is I just wanted to make a movie. I've known for a while that I've wanted to direct and make movies, and I thought that if that should be the goal, to make a movie. And so going into visual effects was in my head was like, this is learning an actual skill that is related to making movies. And of course, like I think a lot of people do this where they the age of the internet, you look up your so I look up a lot of filmmakers that I admire and take a look at their career. So James Cameron was a visual effect supervisor on Piranha 3D. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think the director they had on that movie had some sort of like breakdown or quit or something. And they decided to bring James Cameron. He was already the visual effects supervisor, so they decided he would be a good fit to finish the movie. And that's how he got his start. So I was framing a lot of my decision making on that, and then all the while trying to make movies and failing to do so. But that's so when it came to making About Pie, it is based on a lot of my personal experiences. Like the story you see in the movie is, I would say, like, the funnier version of it, of course, and also composite characters of a lot of different experiences, with the exception, I think, of the opening to the movie with the tall goth girl. That was actually basically a word for word recreation of how that actually happened. But yeah, so I was actually having these experiences, going out on dates. I think it was common at that time, about 4 or 5 years ago, when Tinder finally became an acceptable way, and online dating for people to meet. And I really did actually think that you're trying to have like a normal date with someone, something where you can talk, something where there's not a lot of like preconceptions about what you're doing, like getting drinks, or it's not like getting coffee is just a little, can seem more like a business interview. And eventually, I mean, when you're a filmmaker, you're always trying to, you kind of think in this, like, how could this be made into something else? And at first I thought it would be good as a web series or, but I think in the back of my mind, I always thought, like, I want to make this a movie. So we shot the short film version of it, kind of to test, like, does this idea work? I mean, I guess not. For me, it was, does this idea work? Is it actually funny? Is it just weird? And after I got a lot of positive feedback about the short film, we decided to make the feature. But I guess, like, it's funny enough, I wasn't planning on acting. This wasn't I wasn't pursuing an acting career, but it became the part of the experiences of failing to make movies prior to this was dealing with actors and dealing with their, like, when the project doesn't work out, or when it's like, when you have very little budget, keeping their expectations, aligned with, how much money you actually have and how long this is going to take. I decided that I have to act in this for the sole purpose that I'm going to be the cheapest option, because I will cost nothing, and the one person I can rely on to be there every single time.
The interesting thing about Pi is that while this is a movie about your character and his kind of like his love life, to me it's a film about like a spectrum of relationships, isn't it? Because you also, you have a friend, you have a mother, you have a father, you all have like stories dedicated to, like, your relationships with them as well. Was that always kind of like part of the picture, or is that something that was those relationships with the friend, the mum, the dad, or those kind of things that kind of glued all the other relationships in the films together to make kind of like a complete whole?
It's definitely something that developed over time. What I originally wrote was much more based on the actual dates, but how the actual dates would always kind of go awry. And then as we started shooting it, I realized, that not even actually start shooting it, but like, as I started, like, changing it from being just a screenplay to something we shoot, it started to, even then I started to realize that it's really about the other people, the other relationships. And eventually I had to start separating the main character from myself. So in the main character's life, and yeah, that's what it became, the focus of, this is like how you put it, this is about the spectrum of relationships and how important they are. And obviously, like, the best friend / roommate becomes a very, very important, relationship in his life. And that's true, it's true in real life too.
So the $1 million question, I imagine, that a lot of people will ask, why Pi? What is it about Pi that's really kind of like, that really kind of like gets you going to the point where you have it in your movie?
It really, I actually would tell people this all the time. It actually is a great first date. It's you actually feel like you're going on a date. Most pie places have like a cute and kind of like nice, especially in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a lot of different pie places, but they have it's like a nice environment. And it's something simple. You don't have to get like a whole dinner. And it really, and also pie is who doesn't love pie? That's I think the one of the many taglines in the movie. But it really did. It made, I think deep down what I felt like, there was one, I love pie, of course. And two, it's also making the first date something I didn't have to worry about or think about. It was just the same thing all the time. Then I could like really get to know the person and not be worried about the first date. And honestly, like, I guess like you could also say that when I was asking women out on dates, for the whenever I would say, do you want to get pie? They would say yes, for the most part. It seemed to be also the most effective, and going to get a yes to a first date.
Does is making a pie similar in any way to making a movie? Is the structure of making a pie similar? I mean, I asked that because, making a pie, first thing you need is a foundation, don't you? You need kind of like the base, and then you kind of like add everything else. It gives the flavor. Then you have the complete whole at the end. I imagine making a movie be kind of like a similar path. You need to have your foundation, whether it be your script or your concept, and you kind of like add all the other ingredients on top of it, and then put it in the oven for a couple of years, and bang, there's your movie. Is it similar in any way?
Well, here I got one for you. My wife, who was my last pie date, of course. She she produced the movie, or she was one of the producers on the movie. And she, because the reason she was my last pie date is because I had given up on going on pie dates. And then she read my script and said, well, we have to go on a pie date. But her family actually works in concrete and construction. And the first thing that they relate a lot of things to how relationships are, related to building a house and having a good foundation.
Yeah.
So it's funny you say that, because I hear that all the time. I have a good one for you though, when it comes to making a movie and in relation to pies, even though it's not really an answer to your question, but I promise it's worth it. When I started writing the script, like I said, I started writing it as a web series. So I wrote everything in chapters. And then when we shot the movie, we shot everything, based on chapters, and even organized, all the different shots and shot lists. Everything was organized into these pie flavors. And it actually was such a teaching lesson on how to, on making a movie, because everything got very segmented and very organized into these very particular ways. Everything was like, for the blueberry shoot, everything was related to that. And even when we bring that actress back for subsequent scenes, it was still related to blueberry. So we would organize it that way, like all the takes on the board would say, B, and then we go to the, C number and then the take. So it's actually a really great way to organize and even edit the movie down the line. I thought to myself for a long time, like, should I take out the pie related title cards? But in the end, I left them because they were also very good for editing purposes. You can break up the action, and it reminds the audience about what's going on. But yeah, it's I would actually say that baking is a very good metaphor for relationships. Having a good foundation, having, when you bake something, it's not just about eating it, it's about its presentation and how it stays together and how it looks. So it's a good metaphor across a lot of things.
The film is set and shot in Los Angeles. You live in Los Angeles. You watch so many movies made in LA because it is LA. That's like kind of like the place to make movies. And there's different kind of like ways that people could go about shooting it. You can do the whole Hollywood sign and all the other kind of big attractions and such. And then there's another way where I love it when I watch independent filmmakers make films in Los Angeles, because it's about their Los Angeles experience. You check out what their haunts are, what the places they like to hang out with, places they find interesting. I imagine for yourself, a lot of places that you shot in, a lot of the, say, different pie places, a lot of the different places your character would hang out. I imagine these are places that are intimately and so, or am I wrong? Was there places that you found during your shooting that maybe you didn't know of Los Angeles before?
You're spot on. For the most part, it was places that I loved and were big parts of my life. it's if you're from LA, you'll notice that it's either shot most of it's shot in the Valley or on the west side near Culver City and Venice, because that's where I lived. This movie took about 4 years to make. So for 2 years, for half of it, I lived. I guess actually almost 3 years. For 3 years, I lived on the west side near Culver City, and then out in the Valley. But I grew up near the Valley and have an absolute love of it. I'm one of the people who's from LA, loves the Valley. And it is really my love letter to that. And that's why I didn't include some of the more, common landmarks, is because my love of the parts of LA that most people don't know about or love. But that being said, like Paul Thomas Anderson has shown us how much he actually loves the Valley too. I think he has a movie coming out called Licorice Pizza that's about his love letter to the Valley in the 70s or 80s. But it looks amazing, of course. But he has the same kind of I have the same kind of reverence for these lesser known parts of Los Angeles.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by 80s Tees. 80s Tees is an online retailer of licensed t-shirts and pop culture gear from your favorite movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, comic books, and musicians. Celebrate your inner 80s nerd and click on the link in the show notes below to get the raddest retro t-shirts delivered to your door. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Loot Crate. Founded in 2012, Loot Crate is the worldwide leader in fan subscription boxes. Loot Crate partners with industry leaders in entertainment, gaming, sports, and pop culture to deliver monthly themed crates, produce interactive experiences in digital content, and film original video productions. No matter what you geek out about, Loot Crate has a subscription box for you. To get your very own exclusive collectibles, apparel, and gear delivered to your door, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is also brought to you by Vudu. Watch the latest movies and TV shows anytime, anywhere. No subscriptions, no contract. Enjoy stunning quality in up to 4K ultra high definition at home, and download and watch on your mobile device as well. To rent and buy from over 100,000 titles or watch thousands of movies free with Vudu Movies on us, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. Now, back to the show. So imagine the scenario a year from now, international travel is back. I decide I want to go to LA. I hit down in LA, I'm hungry, I want to get some pie. What's the first spot you recommend for me to go to?
Republic of Pie in North Hollywood. It's a great place for two reasons. We didn't you don't really see the interior of it in the movie because they didn't want us to shoot. It would cost way too much to shoot there.
Really?
So it would. I think they probably get more. What's interesting about that place is they have live music. In fact, the reason and this is actually part of my pie date story was the reason I found out about it is because a friend of mine who's a musician was like, I'm going to perform at this place called Republic of Pie. And, there's so many things that have unique names. So there's like the Banana Republic. I honestly, when he said Republic of Pie, just figured it was just a music venue. And then I went there and they had great pie, they had great coffee, and they had live performances. And that was part of, me like really thinking like this place is great for a first date. But it actually is it is a really unique, great venue. And that would be the first place I recommend. There's another one called the Pie Hole, which has a couple of different locations. They have a type of like pies that are, they're unique, kind of like unique like flavors. Like, I don't know if they still have this one, but they had like the breakup pie or something like that. And it was like this super heavy. I mean, it was like, almost like a giant Reese's peanut butter cup. And it actually had potato chips on top of it.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of those things that shouldn't work. And then you eat it and you're like, well, this works way too well. Then you eat too much of it and you're like, I kind of feel sick. we actually did, as a promotional piece when we were raising money for the movie, we did this on March. I think we actually messed this up. Of course, we did it on March 14th. So like, the numerical pie. And we did this promotional thing where I went to a bunch of these spots and tried their different pies. And then I think Pie Hole was later on the list. And by the time I got there, it was, I had eaten way too much food and pie at that point, and it had too much sugar. But still, like, the Pie Hole was great. And then there's one more, the Pie Bar, which has a location. They used to have a location in Los Angeles, but it's now primarily in Long Beach. And they were great. They actually let us film there. The owner donated to the Indiegogo, and she was super, nice. That's and cool. Helpful. And yeah, she was really cool. Her name's Lori. And the Pie Bar, and it's funny, I didn't even realize this until my wife got a glass of wine there. And I was like, where'd you get that wine? And she's like, it's a pie bar. I'm like, no way, it's just an actual bar. And Lori's like, yes, that's the whole point. That's why it's called Pie Bar. So Pie Bar is probably, honestly, maybe one of the best of all of them for an actual first date, because they have great pies there, and they actually serve really good wine.
Awesome. That sounds really cool. All right. I'm going to definitely put those on my list, because hopefully international travel will open up soon, and then we can start moving around. I want to talk about your approach to structuring the movie. So I checked out the Facebook page for About Pie, and I saw one of the earlier posts you put up was like storyboards for the movie. Do you use storyboards for the whole film, or was that just more for like kind of like the short film kind of stuff you were mentioning before?
We tried to make a storyboard for the whole film, but I felt so bad. The artist that made those storyboards was being super cool and doing it for free because we didn't have much money. And I just started to feel bad that he was doing so much work, and they were great storyboards. So we decided not to move forward with, if I had the money, if the movie had, the production had enough money, I would have had him do storyboards for the whole thing. Cause he did a great job, and it was actually great to, be able to, show, like, have that, even though it was very brief, on set. Cause one of the hardest things, and I have to give credit to, my wife, the producer, and one of the producers, Thomas, Sapin, and also, Caleb Thalin, who was the cinematographer, they really picked up the ball when I would be acting. Cause like, I would do a better job in the beginning of the shoot days at, being able to act, and then go take a look at the take and make, give notes and stuff like that. But as the day would wear on, I would get seriously tired, and I would rely on them to, pick up the ball and take it from there. I mean, sometimes I think they would come over to me, and I'd just be like slouched over, just like, yep, just you're in charge now. I've run out of energy. So that was so being able to have storyboards for a couple of them was obviously helpful, as one of those things like, no, just take a look at the storyboard. But it would for the next one, I would definitely have the whole thing storyboarded based on shot lists and stuff like that.
You mentioned before different ways to try to fund your independent production. And look, one of the ways you went about it was that Indiegogo. And I've talked to so many different filmmakers about crowdfunding, and I've had kind of mixed reports about it. What was your kind of experience of crowdfunding? Because a lot of indie, filmmakers or potential indie filmmakers will be listening to this podcast. And I just want to see if you could just add some light on what it's like to kind of go down that road, because for some people they say it's really fun but a lot of work. Other people say not so much. Where do you kind of fall on the whole thing?
I would say that the raising money through Indiegogo was by far the most stressful part about making this movie. I'm not trying to turn people away from it, but it does require a lot of work, and it can be done really well. We were semi-successful. I think we made our goal a little high. But it honestly, I did like a crowdfunding class, and afterwards we did kind of like a postmortem on the campaign, and I with the guy who teaches this class, and he pointed out something super simple, was just like a linking issue that we had, that instead of like linking it to the website and then your Indiegogo, have all your links kind of, forward to your, just straight to the Indiegogo. Like people will just be like, we'll see past the difference. And that apparently was a big, big issue with it. And yeah, I'm sure if that was, if I had known that, some things would have gone smoother. But overall, it was still a very, very, very stressful process. If you want to have a very successful campaign, you actually have to still budget for, and this was, 4 years ago, $1,500 to, $3,000. Depending, I guess, on how much you want to raise. Like if you only want to raise $10,000, obviously that number is much lower. But the more money you want to raise, the more you actually have to put into the project, and it's put into the campaign. And it was very stressful. It is a good route for some people, but if anything, what it taught me was that we made more. We were able to raise more money during the campaign just by me calling people and telling them about the project, which I think is probably more effective use. If you take the same amount of time and effort and just put it into making calls, I think you would achieve the same result. So it just depends on if you like getting on the phone.
Do you find that getting on the phone is still something that people do, considering the whole social media aspect of things these days? Is it more DMs than phone calls these days?
It might change at some point, but for the most part, people who have money to spare are much older than us, and they like getting a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this film has taken up 4 years of your life. It's finally out for people to see. I watched it like a week, 2 weeks ago, and I sort of find it to be an incredibly charming movie. For yourself, though, as the filmmaker, this is your baby. This is the movie that you put your time and invested your money in, etc. Now that it's out for people to see, what is it like to have people know that they're watching your film, the reaction to your film? I know you had a premiere in Los Angeles. Even though this is a digital release, what was it like watching the movie for the first time with an audience in a cinema?
It's lovely and horrifying at the same time. It was, I did not master the movie in a theater. So there was a lot of these and things that I know that no one else probably noticed, but just all of a sudden hearing all the sound and all the little nuances in a theater was a little bit, horrifying, but hearing everyone, react to the movie, was great. It was something. So I think the further I get away from the release date, which was stressful, of course, because we actually have to do most of the marketing for the film still. So that the further I get away from that, the more it becomes like I realize how special it was. Honestly, the part that meant the most to me for having a premiere was for the people who worked on the film. You can see how much it meant to them. And I've gotten, since then, like a lot of the actors in the movie have emailed me saying how much it meant to them. And that's the best part about having like an actual premiere. When we did the short film, they said something similar. So I anticipated that. And it's a little bit still ongoing. There's the primary window for on demand is still going on, and of course we have November coming up, and in the United States there's a lot of pie related to November, so we're doing one more little push then, and I'm just happy that it got it's not just going to be a time capsule for me and my friends and the people who worked on the movie. I'm happy it's actually getting out to the world. That's the most meaningful part for me, that it's out in the world.
Well, for me, having watched it, and I get so many films sent my way, I think it's one of the most kind of like charming and best romantic kind of comedy films I've seen this year for sure, if not the best. I mean, I don't get a lot of them sent my way. I'm kind of like, I don't know, must be my reputational personality. I get a lot of horror sent my way, but so it's so great to watch something like About Pie, because it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. And again, not to pardon the pun with all the pie jokes, but it's got a lot of flavor to it as well, which I really appreciated. And I really dug your film, Joshua. And I just want to see if you can just let people know where they can check out the film online.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, iTunes, Google, Microsoft Store, I have links. I've saved all these different links. One sec.
Would the best place for people to check it out would be the About Pie website?
Yeah, aboutpiemovie.com.
And I believe if people go there, they should have all the links to all the different streaming services, digital video services to check it out. And I do really highly recommend checking out this movie, because as someone who's just gotten out of lockdown as of like this week, my family and I will be going out for the weekend, finally into the city after like 3-4 months. One thing that's been on my mind ever since watching the movie was pie. And I need to buy the fresh kind, because like I'm not going to the store and putting it. I'm getting like the fresh kind. I'm going to buy it because pie is on my mind because of About Pie. And speaking of pie, if the scenario is a switch from my scenario I said before, and you ever come to Sydney, I need to recommend to you that you check out the Australian meat pie. Have you ever had a meat pie before, Joshua?
I have, and I don't think I've had an authentic Australian meat pie, but I was actually going to say, like, do you have a pie that you can recommend or a favorite pie? So yeah, I will absolutely try that.
Absolutely. I mean, the meat pie, the Australian meat pie is kind of like this, like a signature kind of like Australian dish. And so if you're ever in Sydney, there's a place called Harry's Cafe on Wheels, and they do like the mind-blowing pies. They do stuff with pies, like you can have like just your plain meat pie, you can have a meat pie with mashed potato and peas. It's like all types of different stuff you can do with it. And I highly recommend doing it if you ever find yourself in Australia. And yeah, I don't know what's in the States, like if there's any kind of like Australian bakeries or such. Maybe there are. I'm not 100% on that. But if you ever find yourself on this down under in my neck of the woods, I really recommend do the meat pie. I think only then will your pie journey will be complete, Joshua. And for everyone listening, one more time, About Pie, out now on digital. Go to aboutpiemovie.com, check out the links, watch this movie, especially for, you want to watch something that gives you a little bit of lift, a little bit of like a flavor, and a very charming movie as well. I really do recommend people checking out About Pie. And Joshua Lester, congratulations with the film. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for reaching out, and it's been great talking to you today.
Yeah, great to be here. You should mark this as my first media relation for any in my filmmaking career. So this was great. I really appreciate it.
Well, I hope the experience has been pleasurable for you. Because
it has. This is great.
That puts good thing you told me that afterwards, because I didn't have the pressure for beforehand. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.